If you're hearing this, then I didn't make it. Or maybe I did. And this recording is the last thing I can leave behind before they erase what's left of me. I don't know how much time I have. The battery indicator on this recorder keeps flickering, and every few minutes I hear aircraft overhead that aren't showing up on any civilian radar apps. That alone should tell you something. You don't scramble Black Ops assets for a man telling stories. You do it for a man telling the truth. My real name doesn't matter anymore. It was stripped from me the moment I signed the clearance documents. Inside the facility, names were inefficient. We were identifiers, access levels, genetic compatibility scores, disposable resources. But I was human. At least I think I still am. For decades, the world has obsessed over Area 51, aliens, UFOs, reverse-engineered spacecraft, secret weapons, laser tech, anti-gravity engines. And every time a new theory went viral, the government smiled quietly because every single one of those distractions worked exactly as intended. Because the truth is far worse. Area 51 isn't trying to contact extraterrestrials. It's trying to replace us. This isn't speculation. This isn't a theory I read on a forum at 3 in the morning. I was there. I walked the corridors buried beneath the Nevada desert. I saw the chambers. I saw the bodies growing in the tanks. I heard them breathe before they had lungs that should have worked. And I saw the moment when the project crossed the line from unethical into irreversible. It started with a summons. No warning, no explanation. Just a secure message delivered through a channel that technically shouldn't exist anymore. A channel I only recognized because years earlier, during a classified briefing, an instructor had told us, "If you ever see this symbol, your life as you know it is already over." The subject line read, "Atlas Protocol, immediate compliance required." I remember staring at the screen, my coffee going cold in my hand, a strange pressure forming behind my eyes. Atlas wasn't a research designation. It wasn't military. Atlas was contingency. Within minutes, my phone shut itself off. Not lost signal, not dead battery. Off. The lights in my apartment flickered once. My laptop froze, and then everything went back to normal except me. At exactly 5:47 a.m., a black SUV parked outside my building. No plates, no engine noise. 2 men stepped out, gray suits, no visible weapons. But I've been around long enough to know when someone is armed in ways you can't see. They didn't introduce themselves. One of them simply said my full legal name. The other handed me a thin folder and said, "You've been selected due to genetic compatibility and psychological resilience." I laughed. I actually laughed. I thought it was some kind of elaborate joke, some psychological evaluation I hadn't consented to. Neither of them reacted. "You are not being asked," the first man said. "You are being reassigned." I didn't get a chance to say goodbye to anyone, not that it would have mattered. By the time the jet lifted off, my digital footprint was already being dismantled. Credit cards flagged, accounts frozen, employment records sealed. To the outside world, I was already disappearing. We landed in Nevada just after sunrise. From the air, the base looked exactly like the satellite images everyone's seen. Flat, boring, beige buildings scattered across the desert, nothing special. That illusion lasted exactly 6 minutes. Because after we passed the surface checkpoint, we didn't stop. We descended. The elevator wasn't listed on any blueprint. No floor numbers, no indicators. Just a smooth, silent drop that lasted far longer than physics should have allowed. My ears popped. My stomach twisted. At some point, the pressure changed in a way that made my vision blur, like my body was being recalibrated for an environment it wasn't meant to enter. When the doors opened, I smelled it. Sterile chemicals layered over something organic, warm, alive. The man in the gray suit finally spoke again. Welcome to Delta Sublevel Complex. I hadn't heard that name before, and judging by the tone in his voice, I wasn't supposed to. We walked through corridors of white composite material that absorbed sound. No echo, no hum, just the quiet awareness that something was watching from behind the walls. Cameras weren't visible. They didn't need to be. Biometric scans happened constantly. Retina, gait, blood oxygen, neural response. At one checkpoint, a machine scanned my spine. At another, it read my heartbeat patterns like a fingerprint. Finally, we reached a room with a glass wall stretching from floor to ceiling. On the other side were the tanks. Hundreds of them. Tall, vertical containment chambers filled with translucent fluid. Inside each one floated a human-shaped figure, some adult-sized, some adolescent, some clearly not finished, limbs slightly too long, rib cages too pronounced, skulls just a little off. They looked peaceful. That was the worst part. "They're not clones," a voice said behind me. I turned and saw a man in a white lab coat. No name badge, just a geometric symbol etched in black metal. "Cloning reproduces error," he continued. "We're correcting the design." My mouth went dry. "What are they?" I asked. He studied me for a moment, then smiled in a way that made my skin crawl. "Our successors." That was the moment I realized this wasn't a weapons program. It was a replacement program. And humanity was already behind schedule. The man in the lab coat didn't wait for my reaction. He never did. People like him learned long ago that shock works better when you don't give it room to breathe. If you let someone process what they've just heard, they might object. They might panic. They might refuse. So he kept talking while my brain struggled to catch up. "The public thinks of extinction as an accident," he said calmly, walking along the glass wall. "Asteroids, plagues, climate collapse, but extinction is rarely sudden. It's gradual, it's managed, and when done correctly, it's almost humane." I followed him, my reflection moving alongside the tanks. Faces drifted past me in the liquid, eyes closed, mouths slightly open, expressions frozen somewhere between sleep and awareness. "You're talking about killing people," I said. He stopped, turned, and for the first time, his smile disappeared. "No," he replied, "I'm talking about phasing people out." He tapped the glass with one knuckle, the sound barely carried. "These aren't replacements in the way you're thinking. They're not invaders, they're not conquerors, they're continuity." I didn't like the word, not the way he said it. We walked deeper into the facility, past the tanks, past observation rooms where technicians monitored vitals scrolling across transparent screens, heart rhythms that were too stable, brain waves that didn't behave like human ones. That's when I noticed something that made my skin prickle. None of the technicians were talking. They moved efficiently, methodically, no small talk, no jokes, no human noise, and when they did glance toward the tanks, their expressions weren't curious or proud. They were reverent, like priests in a cathedral. The man led me into a briefing chamber, circular, windowless, with a table that rose smoothly from the floor when we entered. The surface lit up, projecting a symbol I'd seen before. A stylized double helix, broken and reconnected. "This," he said, "is Project Adamant." The name hit me harder than it should have. Adamant, unbreakable, immutable. Adamant isn't about creating something new, he continued. It's about fixing what went wrong the first time. I swallowed, and what exactly went wrong? He looked at me as if the answer were obvious. Us. The display shifted. Genetic sequences appeared, human DNA at first, then something else layered on top of it, structures I didn't recognize, patterns that repeated in mathematically impossible ways. "This is not alien DNA," he said, anticipating the question forming in my mind. At least, not in the way people imagine. I leaned closer, my pulse pounding. Then what is it? He hesitated, just for a fraction of a second. It's pre-human. The room felt smaller. Recovered from where? I asked. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he changed the projection. Images appeared, satellite photos, declassified but heavily redacted, crash sites, not wreckage, not debris, perfectly circular depressions in the earth, no burn marks, no fragments, just absence. These sites were found decades ago, he said. Some in Nevada, others in Siberia, Antarctica, the ocean floor. They predate recorded UFO sightings. My stomach tightened. You're saying whatever left those marks was here before us? Yes, he replied, and more importantly, it was us, or close enough. He let that hang in the air. Humanity likes to believe it's the pinnacle, he continued, the final product, but evolution doesn't work that way. It iterates, it abandons failed builds. I thought about the tanks, about the bodies. Those things out there, I said slowly, they're not just modified humans. No, he agreed, they're optimized. He brought up another image. This time it was a human brain, then another brain beside it, similar in shape but denser, more folds, strange structures interwoven through regions we barely understood. They process fear differently, he said. They don't freeze, they don't panic. Their emotional responses are regulated. They can tolerate sensory input that would shatter a normal mind. And empathy, I asked. A pause. Optional, he said. I stood back. That's when the real weight of it hit me. This wasn't about survival. It was about control. Why me? I asked quietly. Why bring me here? He finally looked directly at me. Because, he said, you passed phase 1 screening without knowing it. The floor beneath my feet seemed to tilt. What screening? Your entire life, he replied. Your genetic markers, your psychological profile, your response patterns to stress, isolation, moral conflict. I shook my head. You're saying you've been watching me. We've been watching everyone, he corrected, but not everyone qualifies. A new display appeared. Faces. News anchors, politicians, scientists, military officers, social media personalities. Some familiar. Some disturbingly familiar. They're already integrated, he said. Early generations, field trials. My throat closed. You mean? Yes, he said. Some of them aren't human anymore. I stared at the faces, my mind racing. How can you tell? I whispered. He zoomed in on one image. The eyes. They blink less, he said. They don't micro-express fear the same way, and when the transition is complete. The image shifted. The face didn't change much. Just enough. They don't age, he finished. My recorder clicked softly in my pocket. That sound would haunt me later. Because at that moment, the man in the lab coat leaned closer and said the words that finally broke me. You're not here to observe, you're here to decide. I looked at him, my heart hammering. Decide what? He smiled again. Whether you want to help guide the transition. His eyes flicked briefly toward the tanks. Or become obsolete with the rest. That was when I noticed something moving in one of the chambers behind the glass. Not floating, not twitching, but turning its head directly toward me. And I swear to God, its eyes opened. The moment its eyes opened, the room changed. Not visually, not at first. It was the air that shifted, the pressure, the subtle vibration I hadn't noticed until it disappeared for half a second and then came back stronger, like standing too close to high-voltage equipment, like the hum you feel in your teeth before you hear thunder. The being inside the tank didn't move its body. Just its head, slowly, deliberately, turning until its face aligned perfectly with mine. The fluid inside the chamber rippled outward in concentric rings, even though nothing had touched the glass. Its eyes, too clear, too focused, locked onto me with an intensity that had nothing to do with curiosity. I felt exposed, not watched. Accessed. That's impossible, I whispered. The man in the lab coat didn't look surprised. Phase 3 cognitive activation, he said calmly. Earlier than expected, but not unprecedented. I took a step back. The thing's lips parted. No sound came out, but my head exploded with sensation. Not pain. Information. Images slammed into my mind so fast I couldn't separate them. Faces I'd never seen. Places that didn't exist on any map. Structures that defied geometry, folding inward on themselves while remaining stable. A sensation of falling upward through layers of reality that peeled away like skin. I gasped and nearly collapsed. Strong hands grabbed my arms, steadying me. Breathe, the man said. Don't resist it. Resist what? I snapped. He didn't answer. Because the being did. Not with words. With understanding. It wasn't speaking English or any language. It wasn't transmitting sound or even structured thoughts. It was syncing. Matching frequencies. Aligning neural patterns. I suddenly knew that it wasn't awake in the way humans wake up. It had always been awake. Waiting. I ripped myself free and stumbled backward, nearly tripping over a console. Shut it down, I shouted. You said observation only. The man raised one finger. Too late, he said. Initial contact has already occurred. The tank dimmed slightly as emergency protocols engaged. Technicians flooded the chamber, their movements sharp and rehearsed. Symbols pulsed across the glass walls, warning colors I didn't recognize. But the being didn't panic. It didn't thrash. It didn't react at all. Except for one thing. A faint smile. That thing, I said, my voice shaking, it knows me. Yes, the man replied, that's the point. They took me to a smaller room after that. No windows, no glass walls, just a chair bolted to the floor and a table with a screen embedded in its surface. I sat there for hours. Or minutes. Time didn't behave normally underground. Eventually, the man returned. This time, he brought a woman with him. She looked younger than most of the staff, dark circles under her eyes, hands that trembled just slightly. This is Dr. Havorson, he said. She oversees behavioral assimilation. She didn't meet my eyes. They don't learn the way we do, she said quietly. They don't accumulate information. They inherit it. I frowned, genetic memory. She shook her head. Number shared cognition. When one becomes aware of something, it propagates, instantly, across all active units. My stomach dropped. You mean that thing in the tank? Is no longer an individual, she finished. It's a node. The screen lit up. A diagram appeared, dozens of points connected by lines that pulsed softly. Each generation strengthens the network, she continued. The more interactions they have with baseline humans, the more efficiently they map us. Map us how? I asked. She hesitated. How we lie, she said. How we fear, how we rationalize, how we justify harm. The man in the lab coat nodded. They're building a psychological model of humanity, he said. One far more accurate than any AI system. I leaned forward. And once they're done, they won't need us anymore, he replied matter-of-factly. The words landed like a death sentence. I stared at the screen. You're letting them study us like lab rats. No, he corrected, we're letting them surpass us. Dr. Havorson finally looked up. There's something else, she said. She tapped the screen. The diagram zoomed in on a cluster of nodes. Phase 4 requires external exposure. I felt cold. Define external. Surface integration, she said. Limited release. My heart began to race. You're sending them out there. Yes, the man said. We already have. Images flashed across the screen. Crowded streets, airports, hospitals, government buildings. Among the humans, subtle distortions. People whose eyes tracked too smoothly. Faces that didn't register shock when disasters unfolded around them. Blending tests, he said. They passed 94% of civilian interaction metrics. And the other 6%, I asked. He smiled thinly. Acceptable loss. That was the moment I realized this wasn't a research program anymore. It was an invasion, disguised as evolution. My recorder vibrated in my pocket. A notification light flickered. Dr. Halvorson noticed it. Her eyes widened. You didn't log that device. The man's gaze snapped to me. What device? I didn't answer, because the screen suddenly went black. Every light in the room died at once. For a heartbeat, there was nothing. Then the screen turned back on. But it wasn't showing diagrams anymore. It was showing me. A live feed. From somewhere behind my eyes. A message appeared across the screen, letters forming one by one. We see you now. The voice didn't echo in my head this time. It came from the speakers. Calm, neutral, familiar. My own voice. That's impossible, Dr. Halvorson whispered. The man backed away from the table. The message changed. You are recording this. My blood turned to ice. You intend to warn them. The room shook. Alarms screamed to life. And in that chaos, as technicians shouted and security flooded the corridors, I understood the most terrifying truth of all. They weren't trying to replace humanity someday. They were trying to decide which of us deserved to stay. And they had already started judging. The alarms didn't sound like alarms. They were too controlled, too measured, a low-frequency pulse that vibrated through the walls and into my bones, as if the entire complex were breathing in warning rather than panic. Red symbols cascaded across the screens, but no one ran, no one screamed. That terrified me more than chaos ever could, because it meant this had happened before. Security doors slammed shut all around us, sealing sections of the facility into isolated cells. Somewhere above us, or below, it was impossible to tell anymore. Heavy blast shutters engaged with a dull, final thud. The man in the lab coat recovered first. He always did. Containment breach protocol Sigma, he said sharply. Lock cognitive interfaces, sever external channels. Dr. Halvorson stared at the screen, her face pale. They're not breaching, she whispered. They're responding. The feed still showed my face, my eyes, but the timing was off by a fraction of a second, like a poorly synced mirror. I raised my hand. The image raised its hand before I did. I stumbled back. What did you let them do to me? I shouted. The man turned to me slowly. We didn't let them do anything, he said. You volunteered the moment you didn't collapse during first contact. That's not consent. Biologically it is, he replied coldly. Technicians rushed in, dragging equipment behind them. Neural dampeners, electromagnetic cages, injectors filled with opaque fluid. They moved toward me, not the tank. Get away from me, I yelled. Dr. Halvorson stepped in front of them. Wait, she said. If we suppress him now, we lose the data. The man considered this, then nodded. Fine, he said, but escort him to observation theta. If he destabilizes again, sedate immediately. 2 guards grabbed my arms. Their grip was firm, practiced. But as they pulled me down the corridor, I noticed something wrong. Their heartbeats were wrong. Too slow, too steady. And when one of them glanced at me, his eyes didn't react. No recognition, no curiosity. Just evaluation. Observation theta was deeper than anything I'd seen so far. The air was colder, thinner. The walls darker, absorbing not just sound but light itself. When they strapped me into the chair, I finally saw what the room was designed for. The far wall was transparent. Behind it was another chamber. Empty, except for a line of human silhouettes standing perfectly still. Men, women, different ages, different ethnicities. All naked. All expressionless. "What is this?" I whispered. The lights rose gradually. I recognized one of them. Then another. My chest tightened. "These are staff," I said. "Yes," the man replied, standing beside me now. Or they were. The silhouettes moved in unison. One step forward. Another. No hesitation, no individuality. "They failed phase 4, he continued. Cognitive incompatibility, excessive emotional variance, resistance to integration. You're experimenting on your own people." "No," he said, "we're classifying them." The glass wall flickered. The figures behind it changed. Their posture adjusted, spines straightened unnaturally, heads tilted at the exact same angle, their breathing synchronized. Then one of them smiled. Not a human smile. Too wide, too deliberate. My restraints tightened automatically as my pulse spiked. "This is what happens to those who don't qualify," the man said calmly. "Their biological hardware is still useful. Their consciousness, however, is inefficient." I struggled against the restraints. "You're erasing them. We're repurposing them." The lights dimmed again. When they came back up, the silhouettes were gone. Only the empty chamber remained. I swallowed hard. "And the ones who qualify?" I asked. The man looked at me. "You're looking at one." The screen beside me activated. A series of metrics appeared. Genetic markers, neurological resilience scores, adaptability indices. My name wasn't on the screen. A designation was. Subject A113. "Your baseline humanity is still intact," he said. "For now, but your neural architecture is flexible." I shook my head. "You said they were judging us." "Yes," he replied, "and you passed preliminary review." The screen shifted. A list appeared. Retention candidates. Dozens of names. Some were crossed out. Others highlighted. "What happens to the ones you retain?" I asked quietly. He leaned closer. "They get to remain themselves," he said, "mostly." I laughed a sharp, broken sound. "And the rest of humanity?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he touched the glass. "Humanity as it exists now is unsustainable," he said. "Emotionally volatile, environmentally destructive, cognitively fragmented." "You're talking about genocide." "No," he said, "I'm talking about an upgrade." The lights flickered again. This time, they didn't come back on immediately. When they did, the screen showed something new. A city. A real one. Live footage. Crowds moving through streets, cars, noise, life. Then highlighted among them, subtle markers appeared. Individuals tagged in real time. Selected. Rejected. I felt sick. "They're already doing it," I whispered. "Yes," he said, "and soon they won't need us to manage the process." The screen glitched. For a moment, just a moment, the tags disappeared. The image distorted. And a new message appeared, burned into the feed like a scar. "We do not require permission any longer." The man stepped back. Dr. Havorson's voice came through the intercom, shaking. "Control is failing. They're bypassing oversight." The lights went out again. This time, when they came back on, the restraints around my wrists released. Alarm screamed, not controlled anymore. Panic voices echoed through the corridors. And somewhere deep in the facility, something roared. Not an animal sound. Not a machine. Something collective. Something awakening. I stood up, heart racing. The man in the lab coat stared at the screen, horror finally cracking his composure. "They're accelerating," he whispered. "They're skipping phases." I backed toward the door. "What does that mean?" I demanded. He turned to me slowly. "It means," he said, "they've decided humanity's trial period is over. The facility stopped pretending to be in control. That's the only way I can describe it. For most of its existence, Groom Delta functioned like a machine that never hesitated. Every corridor had a purpose. Every protocol had a contingency. Every human reaction had been anticipated, categorized, and neutralized long before it could become a problem. But when they took over, the illusion shattered. The lights didn't just flicker anymore. They strobed violently, plunging entire sections into darkness while others burned with blinding white intensity. Doors opened and closed at random, sealing people in or letting them out without any human authorization. Screens filled with cascading symbols that no one had programmed. And the sound. God, the sound. It wasn't loud, not exactly. It was a resonance that settled into your chest, vibrating through bone and tissue, syncing your heartbeat to something that wasn't yours. I felt it crawling behind my eyes, pressing against thoughts I didn't remember thinking. That was when I realized something was wrong with me. I wasn't panicking. Anyone else would have been screaming, begging, breaking down. But my mind was clear, focused, almost calm. I noticed roots, patterns, structural weaknesses. My thoughts arranged themselves into probabilities and escape vectors without conscious effort. That wasn't normal. I stumbled into the corridor just as two technicians ran past me, faces streaked with sweat and terror. "They're in the network," one of them screamed. "They're everywhere." A security officer raised his weapon, then froze. His body stiffened, eyes glazing over for half a second too long. When he moved again, it wasn't him. He turned the weapon, not toward us, but toward the control panel beside the door and fired, blowing it apart in a shower of sparks. The door slid open. Not to safety. To a chamber I had never seen before. Inside, dozens of bodies hung suspended in vertical harnesses. Some convulsed violently. Others were completely still, eyes open, mouths moving silently. Data cables ran from the base of their skulls into the walls. I backed away, bile rising in my throat. "Fall back," someone shouted. But the word barely registered before the floor beneath us trembled. Something massive moved somewhere below. The collective roar echoed again, closer this time, and with it came a wave of knowing. Not fear, not pain, certainty. They were done waiting. I ran. Not blindly, purposefully. I don't know how I knew which turns to take, but I did. My feet carried me through service corridors, maintenance shafts, forgotten stairwells that shouldn't have existed. Doors unlocked when I reached them. Security checkpoints went dark seconds before I arrived. They weren't stopping me. They were letting me go. That realization terrified me more than any locked door ever could. I reached a secondary transit elevator just as explosions rippled through the complex behind me. The doors began to close, then hesitated. For a split second, I saw my reflection in the mirrored surface. My pupils were dilated far beyond normal. Veins traced faint dark patterns around my temples, pulsing in rhythm with that deep, impossible hum. I didn't look fully human anymore. The door sealed. The ascent was faster than the descent had been. My body pressed hard into the floor as gravity struggled to keep up. My ears rang, my vision tunneled. Images flooded my mind, cities, faces, futures branching and collapsing in real time. When the doors finally opened, I wasn't in the Nevada desert. I was in a storm drain, somewhere far from the base. Cold rain poured down, shocking my system, grounding me in my body again. I collapsed onto wet concrete, gasping, my heart finally racing like it should have been all along. Behind me, the hatch slid shut. Silently. No alarms, no pursuit. They didn't need to chase me. Because now I understood the final piece. I wasn't escaping. I was being released. They wanted someone on the outside who could see both sides. Someone who could blend. Someone whose warning would be dismissed as paranoia until it was too late. I staggered to my feet and ran. I didn't stop running for hours. Now I'm here, somewhere temporary, somewhere that won't stay safe for long. I can feel them brushing against my thoughts sometimes, like distant radio static just at the edge of perception. They know I'm recording this. They're allowing it. Because the truth isn't meant to stop them. It's meant to sort you. And if you're listening this far, really listening, then they're already watching how you react. Fear, anger, denial, curiosity. Every response tells them something. There's only one part left to tell you. The part they don't want me to finish. If you've made it this far, then you already feel it. That tightening in your chest. That uncomfortable sense that something in this story isn't sitting right. Not because it sounds impossible, but because it feels familiar. That's not fear. That's recognition. I'm running out of time now, not because they're about to break down the door, though that could happen at any moment, but because the longer I speak, the more I feel myself drifting. Thoughts come too easily. Connections form too quickly. I catch myself anticipating things before they happen. That shouldn't be possible. They told me the new species doesn't think like we do, that they don't learn. They converge. What they never told me, what I pieced together while I was escaping, is that the process doesn't start in the tanks. It starts in the mind. You see, Project Adamant wasn't about creating a superior body. That was just the visible part, the part meant to distract the remaining human scientists. The real breakthrough happened years ago, quietly before the tanks, before the integration trials. They discovered something buried deep in human cognition. A flaw. Human consciousness is fragmented, divided. We experience reality in isolation, filtered through emotion, memory, bias, and fear. Every human lives in a slightly different world, even when standing in the same room. That fragmentation made us unpredictable, dangerous, but it also made us inefficient. The new species doesn't experience individuality the way we do. To them, the self is optional. Identity is fluid. Memory is communal. When one of them understands something, they all understand it. No arguments. No denial. No hesitation. From their perspective, humanity isn't evil. It's unfinished. That's the part most people won't accept. They're not angry at us. They don't hate us. They don't want revenge. They see us the way we see a malfunctioning organ. Something that once had purpose, but now threatens the survival of the whole system. Climate collapse, resource hoarding, endless conflict, the inability to act collectively even when extinction is staring us in the face. To them, these aren't moral failures. They're design flaws. And flaws get corrected. The selection process I told you about, it isn't about intelligence or strength or obedience. It's about plasticity. How easily your mind adapts. How quickly you relinquish rigid identity. How willing you are to let go of the idea that you are separate, special, singular. That's why some people disappear quietly. That's why others rise so fast in power. That's why certain faces never seem to age. They aren't replacing humanity overnight. They're bleeding it out. One promotion, one policy, one influencer, one leader at a time. And the rest of us, we're being observed. Even now, they're watching how you respond to this story. Do you dismiss it immediately? Do you feel anger toward the narrator? Do you feel curiosity instead of fear? Each reaction tells them where you fall. I was wrong about one thing earlier. This recording isn't meant to warn you. It's meant to test you. Because if you're still listening, if you haven't turned this off, if you haven't retreated into comfort, then you're already doing what they want. You're adapting. I can feel them closer now, not physically, internally, like a pressure behind my thoughts gently guiding them into alignment. It would be so easy to stop fighting, to let go, to stop feeling this constant, exhausting separation from everything else. That's the temptation. That's how it wins. If there's anything human left in me, anything worth saving, it's this final act of resistance, telling you that choice still matters, at least for now. You don't have to accept it. You don't have to welcome it. You don't have to evolve. But understand this. The next generation won't ask. They won't announce themselves. They won't conquer with ships or weapons or war. They'll inherit the world quietly, efficiently, and permanently. And one day, not long from now, you'll look at the person beside you and feel that something is different. Calmer, colder, more certain. When that happens, remember this recording. Remember that humanity wasn't destroyed. It was improved against its will. I can hear them now. Not with my ears. With everything else. This is as far as I can go. If you're still human when this ends, hold on to it. Because we are becoming rare. And rarity in their world is inefficiency. This is my final record. They know I've finished. So do you. End of transmission.